Dawn breaks over the forests of Eastern Europe. June 1941. Engines idle. Steel waits. More than 3 million soldiers stand poised along the longest invasion front in human history. Panzer, cruise grip, cold metal. Infantrymen check rifles, one last time. Luftwaffe pilots stare into the pale sky, waiting for the order that will set the continent on fire. This is Operation Barbarossa at the moment. Adolf Hitler believes destiny itself has aligned with him. A single blow, he thinks, will shatter the Soviet Union. One summer campaign. One decisive strike. But now, imagine something unthinkable. The engines do not start. The order does not come. Berlin hesitates. What if at this exact breathless second Germany chose not to march east? What if the greatest invasion ever planned was delayed? Not by weeks, but by strategy. If fate had chosen another path here, would the Third Reich have secured victory in the west before awakening the giant in the east? In reality, Barbarossa went forward exactly as planned and failed spectacularly. On June 22, 1941, German forces surged into Soviet territory with breathtaking speed. 3 army groups north, center, and south cut deep into Red Army positions. Millions of Soviet soldiers were encircled. Interior formations, Banise. By autumn, German troops stood at the gates of Leningrad. Kyiv lay fallen, and Moscow seemed within reach. Yet this apparent triumph concealed fatal weaknesses. First, strategic overreach. Germany attempted to destroy a continental empire in a single campaign. The distances were vast, the roads were primitive, and the rail gauges were incompatible. Supply columns stretched hundreds of kilometers, consuming fuel faster than it could be delivered. Second, logistical collapse. Blitzkrieg relied on speed, but speed devours logistics. Ammunition, fuel, winter clothing, and spare parts all ran short. As autumn rains turned roads into mud, German mobility collapsed. When winter arrived, early and brutal, the Wehrmacht was unprepared. Third, Soviet depth and recovery. The Red Army did not collapse, it absorbed the blow. Factories were dismantled and moved east beyond the Urals. New armies formed. Commanders learned rapidly. Losses that would have destroyed any other state were replaced by sheer industrial and human depth. Finally, a two-front war. By invading the Soviet Union while Britain still fought on, Germany repeated the strategic nightmare of World War I, this time on a far greater scale. From this point onward, the war became one of attrition, not maneuver. Barbarossa fell down with it, Germany's chance to win World War II. Now, we change one decision small, in timing, enormous, in consequence. Instead of launching Barbarossa in June 1941, Nazi Germany postpones the invasion of the Soviet Union for at least 1 full year. The reason is not hesitation, it is calculation. Berlin concludes that the Eastern Campaign cannot be decisive while Britain remains undefeated. As long as the British Isles stand, Germany faces blockade, strategic bombing, and the ever-present risk of American entry. So Hitler, against his historical instincts, accepts the argument of his naval and air commanders. The Soviet Union can wait, Britain cannot. Immediately, forces earmarked for Barbarossa are not redeployed east. Panzer divisions remain in the west for refit and reorganization. Aircraft intended for the Eastern Front are redirected to the Luftwaffe's Western campaign. U-boat production and naval aviation receive priority. The Mediterranean becomes a decisive theater rather than a sideshow. Most importantly, time changes sides. Instead of racing against winter in Russia, Germany now wages a concentrated, brutal campaign to break Britain's ability and will to fight. This single delay reshapes the strategic map of Europe. The invasion that once shattered Germany instead becomes a threat held in reserve, like a loaded weapon pointed east, waiting for the right moment to fire. And with that choice made, the war begins to move in a very different direction. The strategic pause. Summer to autumn, 1941. The most dangerous moment in warfare is not the attack, it is the pause before it. In this alternate timeline, the absence of Barbarossa sends shockwaves through every major capital. Intelligence services scramble. Soviet reconnaissance aircraft report something impossible. No mass movement east. Rail yards remain quiet. Panzer formations do not redeploy. In London, disbelief turns into alarm. For the first time since the fall of France, the United Kingdom realizes that Germany is not merely containing Britain, it is preparing to finish it. The forces historically consumed by Barbarossa are now concentrated westward. 17 panzer divisions are retained in Western Europe, over 1,500 aircraft are reassigned to the Luftwaffe's western commands, and logistics units are redirected to port rail and submarine infrastructure. Winter equipment is stockpiled instead of wasted in Russia. This is not merely a delay, it is a reversal of priority. German planners redefine victory. Britain neutralized, America isolated, the Soviet Union deterred rather than provoked. The Second Battle of the Atlantic, late 1941. Starving an island, with the Eastern Front dormant, Germany unleashes a campaign it historically lacked the resources to sustain: total maritime strangulation. The U-boat war peaks in late 1941 instead of 1942. Submarine production accelerates, crews receive longer training cycles, and Wolfpack coordination improves dramatically. Air-sea cooperation tightens, using long-range FW-200 Condors. British convoy losses rise sharply. Not catastrophically, but consistently. Every sunk freighter compounds the problem. Less fuel, less food, fewer aircraft, fewer tanks. The British economy does not collapse, but it bleeds. British countermeasures are under strain. Radar, sonar, and escort carriers still exist, but resources are finite. The Royal Navy must defend Atlantic convoys, Mediterranean supply lines, home waters, and colonial routes. For the first time, Britain feels strategically overextended, not Germany. The air war reimagined, winter 1941 to spring 1942. Learning from failure. Historically, the Luftwaffe failed in the Battle of Britain because it lacked endurance and focus. In this timeline, it returns stronger and smarter. German air doctrine changes in 3 critical ways. First, infrastructure, power stations, rail, junctions, and port facilities, not cities, become primary targets. Second, attrition, not terror. RAF fighter bases are attacked repeatedly, forcing constant repair and exhaustion. Third, operational patience. No rush for immediate collapse. The goal is gradual air superiority. German aircraft losses remain high, but replaceable. British pilot losses are not. By early 1942, RAF sortie rates begin to fall. Not dramatically, but enough. Enough to matter. The Mediterranean Domios. Early 1942. Closing the southern vice. Freed from the Eastern Front, Germany commits fully to a theater it once neglected. North Africa decides the sea. With additional armor, fuel, and air support, Axis forces push decisively across North Africa. Malta long a thorn in Axis logisticums under relentless pressure. This time, it does not hold. Malta's neutralization transforms the Mediterranean. Axis convoys reach North Africa intact. British positions weaken from Egypt to the Levant. Suez becomes vulnerable. Britain now faces a terrifying equation: lose the Mediterranean or lose the empire. Political shockwaves, mid-1942. When strategy breaks morale, no single defeat breaks Britain, but accumulation does. Shipping losses strain food imports, air defense weakens. Mediterranean setbacks erode imperial confidence. American support remains political, not military. In Parliament, voices grow louder not for surrenders, but for negotiation. Germany senses this shift. Berlin does not demand capitulation. It offers something far more tempting: peace without occupation. Britain hesitates, the Soviet dilemma. The giant who is not attacked, while the West burns. The Soviet Union waits. Stalin mistrusts, German restraint. The Red Army mobilizes, but without invasion, morale stagnates. Industry expands, yes, but without the galvanizing force of national survival. The Soviet Union grows stronger, but not blood-hardened. Germany watches, measures, calculates. For the first time, it holds the initiative without firing east. By late 1942, Britain is not defeated. but strategically exhausted. Germany dominates continental Europe uncontested. The Atlantic remains lethal for Allied shipping. The Mediterranean tilts decisively toward the Axis. The Soviet Union stands isolated, uncertain, and alone. The war has not ended, but its center of gravity has shifted. Germany now chooses when and if to awaken the Eastern Colossus, and that choice will decide the century. The guns do not fall silent, but for the first time, they hesitate. Across Europa, smoke still rises from bombed ports and battered airfields. In the Atlantic, the sea continues to swallow steel and men. In North Africa, sand drifts over fresh wreckage. Yet something fundamental has changed. History has lost its momentum. Germany stands at the height of its power, stronger than it ever was in reality. It controls the continent, commands the skies over much of Western Europe, and threatens Britain not with invasion, but with exhaustion. Britain still resists, but now as a defender clinging to equilibrium, not a challenger regaining strength. Across the east, the Soviet Union waits behind its borders, mobilized but untested. Its armies grow larger each month, its factories run day and night. But without the crucible of invasion, its doctrine remains unproven, its commanders and across the ocean, the United States watches carefully. Washington sees two dangers: a Europe consolidated under German dominance, and a war that never quite escalates enough to justify total American intervention. If Britain does not fall, but does not recover, does America step in, or does it wait, calculate, and negotiate from strength? Germany now faces decisions that history never forced it to answer. Does it invade the Soviet Union later when Moscow is stronger, but Germany is unconstrained? Does it seek a cold peace in the West and rule Europe indefinitely? Or does the war stagnate into a permanent armed tension, a frozen conflict spanning continents? No outcome is guaranteed. A delayed Barbarossa avoids catastrophe, but it also avoids resolution. The war becomes smarter, colder, and far more dangerous. From the Atlantic coast to the steppes of the East, millions of soldiers remain under arms. Factories thunder war. Plans multiply. Diplomats whisper. Generals argue. The world stands at a crossroads that never existed. With this earth-shaking result, as humanity enter a long, dominant German century.